Hi there, thank you. My question for the panel tonight is, with the average HECs debt sitting at $26,494 and the average house starting at $896,000, where does the government expect students fresh out of university to find this money?
David Pocock.
It's a very good question. I think one that a lot of young people are asking, and it's very welcome to see the government move on the way that HECs is indexed, but that's only one part of this. We still have this job-ready graduate system, which is charging some students up to 117% more because they study arts or humanities. It's not working, and that really needs to be changed urgently to have a much fairer HECs system. When it comes to housing, housing again, I think we should be looking at everything. I've been talking a lot about the tax system and how we treat housing as an investment vehicle, not as a human right, something that everyone should be able to afford to at least rent or hopefully buy, but we don't do that, and we need to broaden that out to be looking at immigration, having a really sensible conversation about that in a housing crisis. That's got to be on the table. So I think there's a range of options. As Allegra said, we have seen the Housing Australia Future Fund and a few other things. My argument, that could be doubled easily, I think, and more houses built, but we're kind of seeing these smaller solutions that don't really go to some of the root causes of the problem. So there's no quick fixes here.
Yeah. I agree with you. I hate to see humanities being pushed off the table. On the other hand, David, if you're going to get a HECS fee and you come out of school, if you keep churning out journalists, for example, and there's no jobs, they're never going to pay it off. And do we really need more PR people? Because I went to a graduation ceremony and there were PR people going up and up and up and not engineers. I mean, we do have to look at where we need people and where they're going to earn the money, because it's actually not fair to them to just keep churning out these.
It's an interesting point you made, but even after they changed the fees, it didn't change the numbers.
Change behaviour, and
that's what I'm saying. There's got to be some way that we can do this.
I think that was exactly what the Morrison government said, is if we hike these fees by 120%, young people aren't going to want to study what they want to study. They're going to go do something that they hate so that they can get a qualification that'll earn a good income and that we need. But the reality is
if you're a humanities student, you're always going to be a humanities student.
Well, young people study what they're interested in. I think that's a great thing. And I employ someone who did their masters in philosophy. He is outstanding when it comes to a whole range of things, from small business to procurement. It's really about learning how to learn. And job graduates is not working. The university sector said it had to go before the election, and we're still waiting for that sort of reform, which goes to some of the root cause of this ballooning HECs problem that we're seeing. So, I take your point about getting people into the jobs we want, but maybe we should actually look at potentially paying teachers more and ensuring they can afford to.
Carls, I know you've done lots of research around. At the heart of that question is this intergenerational argy-bargy, which is getting worse and worse. Young people are red hot with rage. That's what that question talks to.
Absolutely. It's a problem that I don't see an easy fix to. I don't think anyone on the panel does. And it's a problem that I think political parties in this country are going to have to face sooner or later, because as that younger generation comes through, and they are coming through right now in very significant numbers, but baby boomers who own a lot of property are not going to be the political force they were once, and we saw that at the last election.
They're already on the decline significantly.
They're already on the decline, absolutely. So at the last federal election, young millennials and Gen Z were almost the same number as baby boomers on the voters' roll. However, there is obviously a significant difference between the wealth disparity between those two cohorts. And look, a young person growing up in Sydney right now, the chances of them owning a property or buying a home are extremely remote. We just finished a survey where we asked renters in this country, do they think they'll ever buy a home, and only 15% said yes.
And this is what I see in people coming to me. I had a young guy come into my office and say, look, I think I've done it all right. I've worked hard, I've studied hard, I've got my first job, I've got a $50,000 HECs debt, and I don't think I'm ever going to have my own home. And, he's feeling locked out. But the truth is the numbers bear it out. You see in the last decade or so, households headed by people over the age of 65 have had their wealth grow by about 50%. Households headed by people under the age of 35 have pretty flatlined in their wealth. And we're seeing a tax system that is where you've got two households next to each other, both earning, say, 100 grand. If you're an older household, you'll be paying maybe up to half the tax of a younger working household, despite most likely being better off. And so we don't have this balance right. And I don't blame, this isn't about fighting between the generations or blaming generations, but I think we have to say, our tax system and a bunch of other systems don't work to support younger generations, and that's why we really need to get onto this.
So that question was substantially about HECs debts, Matt Kean. But of course, the HECs debt then has implications on your ability to buy a home.
Sure.
So they're all linked. Yeah. That's the point of the story. I know some of your colleagues in the Federal Liberal Party think housing is the key to basically unlocking the generational votes. Do you have that view? Do you think housing is you kind of ticket in to young people's votes?
Yeah, I think, housing has been the bedrock of the Liberal Party. Robert Menzies himself said that, encouraging people to own their own home is encouraging them to own a part of our country. So that's always been something that's driven my side of politics since Menzies founded the party.
So do you think things like negative gearing, all of those sorts of tax concessions should be looked at?
I think we need to look at a suite of measures to deal with this issue. And one that we are talking about aggressively is allowing young people to access superannuation to be able to own their own slice of the great Australian dream.
Sounds like everyone's not a fan of that here, but wait, let Matt talk. That's the way we roll here. Yeah.
Well, this is about helping people.
That's on the table. I know you're saying it's not very popular. I know what you want to say. I can see that in your eyes. But do you think more should, beyond that policy, because we've argued that one a few times on this show, should other the tax treatment on property be looked at?
I think that there needs to be a suite of measures to address this issue. I'm in the state government, and one of the things we need to do is serious planning reform to unlock the sclerotic planning process that is holding back the supply. We've just had a huge surge in immigration, and after COVID, there was a slowdown in housing approvals. So now there's a gap of around 200,000 houses that were short, and that's going to double in the next 5 years. So we've got to look at everything on the table to get this under control so that you and your generation can access that great Australian dream.
Okay.
Matt, young people are quite savvy, right, with regards to using the superannuation to buy a home. So when we spoke to them across the country, some of the responses were, see, if I take out $30,000 and the next person takes out $30,000 and so on, wouldn't that inflate property prices? And the second point, which is the most profound point, so you want me to use my retirement savings to fund someone's existing retirement?
Well, I think inflating property prices is if it's across the board, and this is a targeted cohort. So, I mean, that discussion is one that we have to have, and we should have the courage to enter the public square and argue the case. And our case is a noble one. It's getting more young people into the housing.
Matt, the courage isn't arguing, it's doing something.
Yeah.
And it's, to be honest, it's the last 20 years of policy that sounds good and doesn't deliver is why we are in this mess, frankly, when it comes to housing.
So there will be a bit of a focus on education tomorrow night. One of the papers is reporting there'll also be funding for a review into racism on campuses. That comes out of a recommendation. But Allegra, I know that you put out a statement about anti-Semitism on campus. There's these encampments at the moment. I think a lot of them are peaceful, but some of them have used language which Jewish students are saying they're not comfortable with. Would you like to this review to look at anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. Look, I think this country is built on the fact that every person is welcome in all our spaces. You know, we don't care where you come from, we don't care about your religion, we don't care about your sexuality, you are always welcome. And as, you know, I'm the daughter of a migrant, and that's how my family came to this country, and we were welcome. And I think, you know, I've got a lot of Jewish students and young people in my area, in my community, and who are afraid and have, you know, have been subject to some things which, you know, no one should be expected to, you know, to have Nazi symbols, you know, drawn on their, dropped into their bags, to, you know, to have food thrown at them, to be, you know, to be sort of told that you're not welcome here. Now, that's they're extreme examples, but that's what the community's feeling. And so I think we do need to find a way to be really clear. Like, you know, we can disagree, you know, we can have very strong and deep opinions about what happens overseas, and we do. But but in this country, everybody is welcome in all places, and that's just a fundamental Australian identity for me.
Quick comment from you?
Well, the fact that Jewish students are being abused and feeling unsafe going about their business is an absolute disgrace. There should be zero tolerance to the perpetrators of that behaviour. That's not Australia, and we should call it out and stamp it out wherever it occurs.
David Pocock, I know that, you know, you've been concerned, obviously, about this issue. How do you have protests and allow protests to continue, but also have a zero tolerance approach to this? It's clearly very difficult for the universities because they haven't resolved it.
I think this is a really important discussion for us to be having. You can see why students are protesting. You see what's happening in Gaza, and I'd argue you've seen the government's fairly lukewarm, you know, messaging around what is a humanitarian crisis, and just awful. So you can see why students are exercised about it, and we absolutely have to ensure that people are allowed to protest. But to Allegra's point, there is clearly a line there where that should not impinge on other students' ability to feel safe and to be able to turn up and learn. And, you know, talking to a few Jewish students at the ANU where there's an encampment, they have had concerns, though the ANU is looking into that. They've actually suspended one student over sort of pro-Hamas, I guess, speech on, you know, on the radio. So I think there's work to do there, but the thing we've got to remember is that we're Australians first and foremost. Yes, it's awful what's happening, but we shouldn't be taking this out on each other. We have so much more in common than our differences, and so let's allow people to protest, but don't take it out on
Well, people
Jewish
can't be
students.
intimidating other people, absolutely.